giving. Father, thank you for the privilege to give, a heart to give, something to give, this opportunity to give. Breathe on our giving, multiply it to meet the needs of the ministry. Return the giving to the giver 100-fold. Stretch their family budgets. Rebuke the devourer for their sake. And give your people creative ideas to create wealth. Bless their businesses, their sales, their labor, their places of employment, that which their hand finds to do. Prosper and bless. I curse poverty and meagerness in the finances of your people and bless them with abundance because you're an abundant God. Let your people find money. Let money come to them from unexpected sources. Checks in the mail, return deposits, unexpected, unexplained, raises, bonuses, benefits, promotions, and blessings. You give because they give. Those with no jobs, give them good jobs, good pay, good benefits. Those in dead-end jobs, give them better jobs, better pay, and better benefits. Save our loved ones. Let the river of your spirit continue to flow in our heart, home, church, and community so we can stand with a legitimate testimony that we're blessed. But others observing our life have to admit that we're blessed. So in all things you receive the glory. We ask it in the only name that matters, Jesus Christ, the strong Son of God. And here we have the offering, and here we have tonight's study. So if someone will pass this out. Thank Brother George for getting me on tonight on the live stream. Thank all of you from Carolina to California and overseas that are tuning in tonight. We will begin in the 22nd chapter of Genesis and then proceed with the entire chapter 23, and if time permits, a couple of verses in 24. And that's just because I'm just going to capsulize what happens in chapter 23. And thanks again to Ann and Dan for my coffee. Praise God. It sustains an old heart. See, they tried to cut it out, but I managed to live anyway. Okay. In the 22nd chapter, verse 20. And it came to pass after these things, it was told Abram, saying, Behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Huz, his firstborn, Buz, well, that was a combination, his brother, and Chemiel, the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hatzo, and Pildash. Why couldn't just be George, Bob, Harry, Gildelap, and Bethuel? And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear Nahor, Abraham's brother, and his concubine, whose name was Rumah. She bare also Teba, Gaham, Thahash, and Macham. I'm sure those were great names in their time. I'd hate to try to introduce that family at a family gathering, but that's another story. We'll stop right there. In chapter 11 of Genesis, verse 26, Terah, along with his family, Abram, Nahor, moved from Ur of the Chaldees with the intention of going to Canaan, which is where Abraham eventually ends up. But Terah got to Haran and evidently liked it there because he settled there. The thing that we need to know, I guess, or we don't need to know, but I'm going to let you know, is that these two cities were deep into paganism, and their main worship was to the moon god. And obviously, Terah was a worshiper as well and felt very comfortable among those of Haran. However, as God always does when he wants a people, he calls us out. Later in Exodus, he says of the delivered Israelites, I called you out to bring you in. So when God calls us out, he calls us into something better. His people could not flourish among these moon god worshipers. So to this day, we are not in total knowledge of what specifically it was in Abram who was raised in a pagan environment in a pagan family that had the traits that God would use to create a new nation. We must remember that up until Jacob wrestles with the angel and his name is renamed Israel, a prince with God, or you've wrestled with God and prevailed, there were no Jews. So we're not talking about Jews here. We're talking about their ancestry that begins, all right, in Abram, but he wasn't a Jew. And we'll see that very vividly, I think. But God calls him out of that pagan society and doesn't even tell him where he's going. He said, you'll know when I get you there, I'll reveal it to you. So he comes out of Haran in chapter 12, verse 1. And then in Acts 7:2, when Stephen is giving his great message that got him killed, he said God called him when he was still in Mesopotamia. Acts 7:2. You'll also find in verse 23 later on, this family branch will become very pivotal in the development of the Israeli nation, in that Bethuel is the father of Rebekah, who will be Isaac's wife. Now, let me make this notation to you. It may not matter to you. It did to me after I printed this off and gotten home, and I said, dear Lord, the references there that are KJV are not KJV. They're NIV. They're the New Infidel Version. And it's a NIV instead of, if you want to make that notation, it's, you don't have to, of course, but later on down the years when I'm dead and gone and you want to research it, you'll say, well, oh boy, got it wrong. I did. And those references are really the NIV in your notes. The thing about it is, not only does Bethuel become the father of Rebekah, this branch of the family tree will give birth to 12 tribes of Arameans. And so it's very, very, and I got that out of the NIV Study Bible. Into chapter, my goodness, Roger, chapter 23, and in your notes I put 12, and it should be 23. I'm ashamed of myself. So talented. Let me make a notation, and as a matter of fact, I went through making notations just before I came out here, but I didn't catch that one. Okay, 23, 1 and 2, Sarah dies. She's 127 years old, and she dies at Hebron, excuse me. Hebron is the place of the great tree of Mamre that we studied a few weeks ago. The tree is so significant that area was known by that tree. It was an object of worship by the pagans, and parts of that tree are there to this day. They've been taking great strides to try to preserve it, and they fenced it in, propped it up, and they're trying to preserve it. But the great tree of Mamre, which we know as Hebron, but at that time it was a pagan site, but it was a landmark. And so therefore, this is where Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Sarah dies there. In verses 3 through 20, and I'm just going to capsulize this rather than go seriatim on the verses, the purchase of the cave at Hebron, or Machpelah, that should have had an H at the end of that A before Mamre. It was, and this is interesting, I found, it was in the land of the Hittites, which is on the border with the Philistines. Now, we don't know a lot, or at least I don't, and I didn't do an in-depth study, but I have done some study for background on who the Hittites were. Excuse me, I've been unable to find out much about their origin except that they are descendants of Canaan. That's in your text and the scriptures. And Canaan was the one that was cursed by Noah. So his offspring were cursed. Now, when they get here, how did they get to here? I don't know. One thing we do know is they migrated out of this area and migrated north to Turkey. And they founded a great nation. Their capital was Hattusa, Hutussa. They became a fierce and mighty kingdom of warriors. And they were the ones that discovered how to create armaments and things from iron rather than bronze. And they were fierce enemies of Israelites later on. But right here, they're getting along well with Abraham. But how they came to be in this locale, when most of their history, and it is a great history, is from Turkey, Anatolia they call it, and they were one of the dominant forces of the ancient world at that time of Mesopotamia. But at this moment, they're in the land of Canaan, close by, if not exactly in the same area that Abraham has settled. The thing about it is that, as I give you in your notes, chapter 10, verse 15, they descended from Canaan. And in verse 9 through 25, he was the cursed son. The thing that is not written here, but cannot be missed, is that Abraham is obviously very, very powerful and very, very wealthy, feared and respected. This happens to Abraham wherever he goes. He's blessed until the inhabitants say, hey, he's more numerous and more powerful than us, and we need to make peace with him. And so this happened under the two Abimelechs that are mentioned in this book, and it moves on to here. And later we will see the same thing in Israel as they are in Egypt. At first, they're well loved and respected as they live in the land of Goshen, but God, as God always does, prospers his people until they became so numerous that a Pharaoh arose that didn't know Joseph, and he gets very frightened and puts them to slavery. Now, you will note that the Jewish history is replete with that. When they were dispersed under AD 70, under the Roman conquerors, they were around the world. It happened again in Spain. It happened in Germany. The Jews were, that's where the Rothschilds became one of the most wealthy families in the world, in Austria, as a representative for antiques to the king, the Habsburg king of Austria. And then later on, the jealousy cropped up again in England. And of course, we see it amongst the Muslims and the Arabs. And we saw it and still see it here in the United States of America and around the world. I don't like them using the term anti-Semitic. It's Jew hatred. That's what it is. Anti-Semitic is just dressing up the fact that it is Jew hatred. And the Jews are hated, have been, since AD 70, wherever they've gone. Wherever they've gone, they planted, they were blessed, they prospered until the resentment of the people in that region turned on them in persecution. And we've seen that until, and matter of fact, my first trip to Israel, I didn't, to see what they've accomplished in that land since 1948 is astonishing. And there were prophetic voices, you know, the fact that the desert would bloom like a rose, and how they have taken the desert and they have cabbages the size of basketballs. And they're the #1 per capita exporter of citrus fruit in the world today. As I said the other week, they found that a certain type of date tree grows even at the Dead Sea. I mean, God has prospered them, and that is hated. And all around them, the Arabs have done nothing with their land. They just hate and want to take, because the blessings of God is still on his people, and he won't remove that blessing. So they say, you're a prince among us. You want this land? Take the whole land. Now, there's one reason why they wanted him to take the whole land under their law. If you only took a piece of the land, the landowner that that held on to the lion's share was responsible for the taxes and the upkeep and everything to the government. If Abraham bought it all, then it all falls on him. So they want him to buy the field. They want him to buy the cave. They want him to buy the trees. And so they negotiate, and he buys this cave at Hebron. It becomes the cave of the patriarchs. Sarah's buried there today. Abraham, Isaac, and let's see, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. Yeah, Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah are buried there. It is known as the cave of the patriarchs. They built a mosque on top of it called the Mosque of Abraham, and it's under Muslim control today. Now, a few years back, might not have been that many, a lot of the Muslims got mad and tried to deface the tomb, but it's still there under their control. Of course, the one thing about the Muslim is they also revere Abraham. So once you get past that, there's not much to brag about. I'll pause for coffee. Questions, comments? I know I'm lecturing. Go ahead.
Can we go back to verse 2 for a minute? Can we go back to verse 2?
Absolutely, sure.
It says that at the end of the verse that Abraham came from the woman Sarah.
I saw that too.
He came. So were they not living in? I mean, he was living in Beersheba.
That's what is implied. They worked together.
Why were they not living together?
Well, it may not have been that they were not living together. She may have been living in her own quarters. She's a pretty elderly lady at this time. He's got some other ladies running around his harem. So, I mean, I don't know. That's the best answer I can give you because I just don't know them. Yeah, well, that may have well been the case, but it does. I noticed that immediately when I read it, but I have no answer for it. I'd rather not try to give one when I don't have one. Oh, yeah. He's quite a bit older. Well, apparently so, but we don't know. I don't want to, I've put enough on old Abraham without putting that one on him, but other questions, comments? These are good. I just wish I had you an answer. Sorry? Say what?
No matter how old the man is, he likes the younger woman.
Oh, guys, we ain't got a chance with these women. You understand that? For those of you around the world, she's saying, no matter how old the man is, he likes the younger women. I can't fuss with that. I know that's the truth. A lot of things come to mind, but I'm going to leave them alone, right? God help me. In verse 10, they bargained for the land at the gate. And this is significant because it was at the gates of a city where business was transacted. So if you wanted to go negotiate property or any business, it was done at the gate where the elders would be sitting. And all you got to do is look at Boaz when he went to bargain for Ruth in chapter 4, verse 1 through 2 in the book of Ruth. He's waiting at the gate for the nearer kinsman because the only one that could say that I can't get deep into this, but this mirrors what Jesus did for us. The only one that legally could buy the inheritance and therefore marry Ruth had to be a kinsman redeemer, and the nearest relative was the one that had first dibs on her. So Boaz is sitting there and he says, "Ho, such a one, come here." And he begins to negotiate. Here's this Moabite that has come here to live among us, and her husband has died, and the law says we're to raise up the inheritance to her and marry her. He first says, "I'll do it." I imagine Boaz's heart fell to his shoes. Then he begins to reiterate to the nearest kinsman what his obligations are going to be. And he said, "Oh, I've got too much. You do it." And I'm sure that Boaz felt like singing, And so that's a mirror of what Jesus did to you. He became flesh and dwelt among us. He took not on himself the nature of angels, but of human flesh. Man had surrendered dominion in the garden. Man had to buy it back. Man had to redeem it, which is what redeem means, buy it. So he came as a spirit-filled man, conquered everything hell threw at him, and succeeded more outrageously than Adam failed, and bought back for you and me everything that Adam had surrendered as our kinsman redeemer. So, but this took place at the gates. I also put into there for your notes, where am I, Roger? Find your place. Jesus. Matthew 16:18. Upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates, the power structure of hell, will not prevail. The word there means overpower the church. Now, very interesting. You guys have been to Israel. I think Jim has. So you know here you where it is to this day, if you go there, you will find artifacts around the parking lot to the god Pan of the Pan flute. And there was a temple there to him. It is also where the springs start the River Jordan. You could step across those springs, which I did. But it is at the bottom of the mountains. Mount Hermon is in the distance, which is the highest peak in Israel. And you remember the psalmist said how good and how sweet it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the beard that went, the oil that came down Aaron's beard. He goes on to talk about the drift from Mount Hermon. Well, the melting ice and snow from Mount Hermon goes in the mountain and comes out in those springs. Very fresh, very beautiful springs. But there is the temple to the god Pan. And that's where Jesus says, who do men say I am? Well, some say you're a prophet, some say you're a teacher. Yeah, what do you say? And that's where Peter spoke and said, you're Christ, the Son of God. Blessed art thou, Simon Bojana, but whatever your name was, Bojangles, I don't think. But Barjona, I got there. Clear up. I've been so sleepy all afternoon, I can hardly live. Okay. And he says, flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, but my Father. And he said, you're Peter, and upon this, not like the Catholics say, upon the Apostle Peter, he'd build his church. Upon your confession that I am the Christ, the Son of God, I will build my church. And the gates, right there, what they believe was a gate to hell. These gates of hell will not prevail or overpower my church. Now, how could that be so? Because the church has power. Luke 10:19, I give you power over all the power of the enemy. Acts 1:8, you shall receive power after the Holy Ghost has come upon you. And then 1 Corinthians 2:4-5, Paul said, I didn't come with excellent speech. I came with the power of God, that your faith would not be able to hold together in the thoughts of man, but in the power of God. I don't know what this is asking me. You want to help me, Brother George? It's asking me something here. It says, enter your passport to schedule, and I would say to you, no, get off my screen. Okay. Is that okay? Thank you. It's good to have people around that know something. I pause for coffee, questions, comments. Y'all making me lecture. I don't like to do that. Oh. Okay. All right. Notice that Abraham insisted on paying the full price. He could have gotten the land for nothing. Why would he not do that? Well, in chapter 14, verse 21-24, he says to the king, I think it was the king of Sodom or Sidon, that said, you take all the spoils, but just a few of the servants. And he said, no, lest you would say, you made Abraham rich. I won't take even a shoe latch from you, except what the young men that went to battle have eaten. That's all I'll receive. Another thing is under the new covenant in chapter 13 of Romans. I read this a lot in our business meeting. And he says in verse 7, render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Owe no man anything but to love one another. He that loves another has fulfilled the law. That's part of the law that one would naturally use, while Abraham did not want to be even considered to be in debt to any of these people. He knew that God had prospered him, was prospering him, and would continue to prosper him. All right. In verses 17 and 20, the property was made sure. The contract was secured. It was his land. Another thing I wanted to point out, and I have to give the NIV Study Bible credit for spearing me down this road. People always desired to be buried in the land of their fathers, in their native country. It's not always possible, and not everyone feels that way, but most people do. We'll be buried at home, near my family, where my family can visit my grave. And so Abraham is buying this land because he knows that God has promised this land to him, and that it is his, and it is his posterity. You'll find that forever in Hebrews 13, 14 through 18, 15, 18 through 21, 17, 5 through 8, and 22, 15 through 18. And all of those references, God has promised this land to Abraham. And he is acting complete confidence that by buying this for a cave and for a burial site, he and his people will own this land forever because God promised. That's the reason I keep getting very upset with these charismatic preachers of today who want to teach replacement theology and tell you that the church has replaced Israel and that all the promises to Israel are now the church's. Now, that just ain't so. Now, a person may say that out of ignorance, or if it's not ignorance, they're lying. Because God made Abraham some promises before there ever was an Israel. And so the land covenants that God gave Israel, this land forever, if you look at the prophetic, in the prophesied rebuilt temple of Ezekiel 47, 48, you'll find that the 12 tribes are there. In Revelation, you'll find that in, I think it's chapter 6, maybe 7, but I think it's 6, you'll find the 12 tribes in there. In the gates of the tabernacle that will come down during the millennium, you'll find that the gates are the 12 tribes of Israel. God hasn't turned his back on Israel. And if you think he has, read Romans 9, 10, and 11. And Paul will make it plain that all Israel will be saved. Now, how will they be saved? Same way you and I are. They won't be saved just because they're Israelites. There will be 144,000 of all 12 tribes that will come to their Messiah in the tribulation. And they're Jews. So these people, they're teaching falsehoods. And again, they may be ignorant in it, or there may be nefarious reasons for that, because there is still that Jew hatred among a lot of people who claim to be Christian. The Klan hates the Jews as much as they did the blacks. And so did Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt refused the ocean-going ship, the St. Louis, refused it to disembark in America. It was full of Jews fleeing Hitler, and he made them go back to Europe, where the lion's share of those people were killed in the ovens. There's been a hatred for the Jews ever since AD 70, actually prior to that. Questions, comments, observations, aggravations? We plow right along then. I was afraid this was not going to go the whole hour like this, but chapter 24, verse 1, Abraham was old and blessed in all things. It says all things. It's just like when Joshua led Israel into their promised land finally. He said, not one good thing has failed that God has promised. In chapter 24, verse 2 and 3, oops, I didn't turn my page. It's important to turn your page when it's time to turn your page, usually. And here's what God says. Abraham said unto his elder servant of his house that ruled over all that he had, put, I pray you, now this is a practice that's always weirded me out. Put, I'm sorry, it's what it says. I pray your hand under my thigh. I will make thee swear by, now notice this oath. The Lord is caps, that means Jehovah God. The God of heaven and the God of the earth. This is an awesome pledge that you will not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. Now that's as far as I prepared for tonight, because I did not want to get into the next chapter too deeply, because it is so rich that it'll take a while to mine that, because this servant is a type of the Holy Ghost. And this seeking out a bride and all that encompasses that is indicative of the Holy Ghost's job in coming to this earth and wooing a bride for Jesus. And I knew I wouldn't have time to get into that properly, so I saved that for next week. But I will. The NIV Study Bible says that his oldest servant is the one he called, which is probably Eleazar of Damascus, recorded in 15:2. And that's where Abraham talks to God about an heir. And God was promised to bless him, and he said, how am I going to be blessed when the one who will inherit my property and everything is this Syrian here named Eleazar from Damascus? Because I don't have a son. Now, this is prior to Ishmael and all that. And I love what the Bible said God said there. He says, this shall not be your heir. Not that person, this. And immediately when I read that, just going back to do the refreshing, it reminded me of Samuel standing before the brothers of David. And they're all lined up, and in the flesh he wants to anoint them. And God says, I have not anointed this. Wow. I don't know if that strikes you any, but it do me. This. But anyway, God said, no, he's not your heir. And as I said in your notes, what to us, or at least to me, is a very bizarre custom, but it wasn't bizarre in that day. And you could bandy around. I read some of the rabbis today and their take on it, because I really had never gone into any depth on studying it. And I wouldn't call what I did today depth either, but I read probably 4 or 5 rabbis and their opinions on this. And you could go from some believing actually it was his genital, or just his hand under his thigh and him sitting on it. But what the rabbis their take on it was that this was a symbol that you are under the authority of your master. And this custom that was common of that era was an indication, yes, I'm taking an oath because I am under the authority of my master. Now, think of the centurion who sends for Jesus because his daughter is grievously vexed. Or really, that's the Syrophoenician one. Because his daughter is dying, we know she did die. And Jesus says to the man, I'm getting messed up with Jairus' daughter now. Jairus was a ruler of the synagogue, the centurion was not. And Jesus says, I will go heal her. He says, no, I'm not worthy that you come under my roof. But I'm a man under authority. He didn't say I'm a man of authority. When you get that right. He said, I'm a man under authority. And I say to this soldier, you go, and he goes, because he's under my authority. I'm under an authority that backs up my orders. That's why Barney can stand out here in the interstate at 85 and block traffic to Gaffney. Not because he's strong enough to do it, but because he's under authority. And that badge is backed up by authority. That's how you can lay hands on the sick in the name of Jesus, and the devil knows he's got to flee, because you're a man or woman under authority. Not your authority, delegated authority by the Holy Ghost. So he said, I'm a man under authority. When I give orders, I expect them to be fulfilled. And so therefore, if you'll speak the word, my daughter will be healed, or my servant will be healed. Just speak the word. And Jesus said, this is the greatest faith I've run into in this area. Just believing that when he speaks, there's authority in that name. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Right here it says, do not allow my son to marry one of these Canaanite women. Was there a particular reason why?
Yeah.
Now, did one of Abraham's sons marry a Canaanite woman?
Later on, I don't know if it's Abraham's son that did it, but later on, Esau did.
Not Abraham, Noah's son. Did one of Noah's sons marry a Canaanite?
I honestly don't remember. You could tell if I've got Jonah swallowing that whale that I'm in a mess here tonight. I've got Jairus, and the centurion messed up, and the centurion had a daughter, and Jairus had the servant of a centurion. What'd you put in my coffee? Whatever it wasn't strong enough. But I promise to y'all, I'm not drunk anything stronger than coffee, nor have I taken any drugs. I'm just giving you the best I can. But I honestly, you might find that to be true. I don't know. It's not in my memory. Did you find it? Look up and let me know, because you deserve an answer. Unfortunately, I'm not able to give you that. No, but remember something. He wanted to continue his lineage. He didn't want it to be part Canaanite. And so therefore he goes back and the servant goes back to his brother's house and gets a bride for Jacob. And we'll get to that next week, I hope. Now here's a quote taken right from that New Infidel version of the Bible. Near the organ of procreation, probably because his oath was related to the continuation of Abram's line through Isaac. And they gave chapter 14, verse 22. And then I got this from the rabbis. This, putting your hand under the thigh, it represented authority, strength, covenant, and legacy. Now, there may be a whole lot more that one could find in that, but I thought for our purposes that was enough. And then he gives him what is an awesome task. Go, Swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, go back to my homeland in Mesopotamia and get my son a bride. You're going to see some things that I'll try to bring out for us because we're a good ways from the end of the hour. And some of the things that we will look at is that what he does when he goes into the land and prays for God to prosper his journey. He goes to the city water supply. And he says, if you've shown me favor, God, let a young girl come bearing water pitchers. And when I ask her to give me drink to me, let her say, I'll not only give you a drink, but I'll draw water for you and your camels, which is quite a task. And when Rebecca comes and she offers to do that, he knows God's prospered his way. Now, he reveals himself. She rushes home and says, these servants have come from your brother Abraham. Why did you leave them there? Bring them in, put their camels up, come in and let's. And he says, I'm not going to belabor my trip until I've told my Aaron. I have come to get Abraham's son a bride, and your young lady greeted us. Now, he came bearing gifts. Gifts, the camels were laden down with gifts. The Lord Jesus came, bled, died, rose from the dead, led captivity captive, gave gifts unto men. He puts those gifts before her and asks for permission. He says, ask her. There's a cup of wine. They push the cup of wine forward. If she takes up the cup, she accepts the invitation. If she rejects the cup, he's released from his vow. So much about it mirrors our walk with God. What did Jesus say? In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not true, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself. Okay, Jesus said, the one who has the bride is the bridegroom. And so, the Hebrew bridegroom goes to his father's house and prepares a chamber. Only the father knows when it is sufficiently created for him to go get his bride. She is engaged, must keep her garments spotless, and prepared for the cry to go out even at midnight, unprepared. She does not know when he's coming. He does not know when he's coming. Nobody knows the day and the hour, not even the Son of Man, but my Father only. When the Father says to the Son, okay, you've prepared it well enough, go get your bride. He goes. At midnight, the cry goes out, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. 5 had oil, 5 did not. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. She's got to be ready for him to take her home to his Father's house. So much of that in this chapter. Prophetically, we've been studying prophecy now for the last 2 or 3 chapters. Big prophecy. This will be too. I stopped there. We've got about 13, 14 minutes. Any questions, comments, or even on any other subject not here? Yes, sir. My brother. Who? Help me. Eleazar was his name. That's what he was designated as. Damascus, Syria. He was a Syrian from Damascus. And back then, well, look, Jesus of Nazareth. There were other Jesuses, which was in Hebrew, Yeshua, in Greek, Joshua. And Jesus in English, it means salvation. And so you would be identified, Joseph of Arimathea, that prepared and gave the tomb. That's how they were designated. Eleazar of Damascus.
Why did he have so much power? Give him so much power, brother.
Why did he give him what?
Why did he give so much power? Why was he giving so much power?
Well, because he was his lead servant over all the other servants, over all the. It would be just like if you were the foreman on somebody's ranch. You know, okay, I own the ranch, but you're my foreman. You call the shots out there. You made sure the property is kept up. You made sure that the hired hands do their job, et cetera. You may even be delegated the authority to hire and fire because of your relationship with me as the landowner.
Well, the reason that I asked that is because of where he had to put his hand above Abraham's thighs. And it was so close to where he had to read, where you read through. I can't get out of that, man.
Well, and then, I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought you were finished.
Well, no, what I was saying, where that, near the organ of procreation.
True.
All right? What it's doing with me is messing me up with Noah then. Some reason, something keep bringing me back to them.
I don't know, my brother. I can't answer you. Satisfactory. The only thing that I know, only thing I can know about this, like I told you, it always freaked me out because of our mindset today. Apparently, it wasn't that big a deal back then, but it would be a big deal to me. And I don't get close to any guys. I don't know if it was a Hammond organ or what kind of Lowry organ. I don't want to be no close to it. It was a sign, I am under your authority, sir. Well, he knew he had a task before him, and that's where he asked Abraham, suppose the girl won't come with me. He said, then you're free of your obligation or your oath. So this was, look at the oath itself. He swore by the Lord, Jehovah, Yahweh, God of heaven and earth. Man, that's all inclusive. This is a heavy. And so therefore, he had to be under the authority of his, quote, master. Now, I know in our environment, we don't like those words even, but that's the best I could tell you. I read after 5 different sources of rabbis and their teaching in the Mishnah and just their own commentary. And that's encapsulating what this entails. That's the best I can give you.
Represented anywhere in the Bible, the value of 1 shekel of silver.
Yeah, I do, doggone it, but I didn't write that down. I read it, but I didn't write it down. It varied somewhat from locale to locale, but I'm afraid to venture you an answer because that's not logged in there. But yeah, I did. They give you you can get it online or you can get it in one of these commentaries. And if I had it out here, let me see if my Bible gives, I don't think, it was a lot of money. If you've got a good study Bible, it should tell you. But I'll see if this one, the Bible that I got, a lot of these notes. No, mine doesn't give it to me.
It's approximately 10 to 11 grams, which is about.
Pardon? Say it loud.
It's approximately 10 to 11 grams, which is about 0.35 to 0.4 ounces. However, its monetary value can vary significantly based on current silver prices and historical context.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But there are some commentaries that will give you approximate what this was, but it's very expensive. And I did not, I'm sorry, I should have put that in your notes. I did not, and I didn't retain it in my memory. But at today's money, it's a whole bunch of stuff that'll buy you a lot of Burger King. Or Bojangles chicken, whatever. Other questions or comments before we go? Yes?
Back to Abraham and Sarah not living together. I don't have any Bible verses to back this up.
I don't either.
Looking at the way humanity is, I think it's possible that Sarah had a huge resentment built up because of Ishmael mocking Isaac. I think there could have been huge resentment in their marriage. Maybe that's why she wasn't with him. I don't have anything to base that on.
Nor do I.
But I think it's possible. And again, but to me, Abraham was always faithful to his marriage with her. See where he was with anybody else. And even after she dies, when she's 127, he's 137, he doesn't remarry until he's 140. He waits 3 more years before he gets married. Why?
Well, I don't know that, which he could have had one while she was alive. Go ahead.
I think, to me, he waited until Isaac was married before he remarried.
You may be right.
And to me, the reason he waited is because he just went through one marriage with a woman who resented his child.
Woo. In chapter 25, verse 8, Abraham gave up the ghost. No wonder he gave up the ghost. No, he did have some other concubines. Keturah was one. And let's see. Now, I'll take a look at that. But I am unaware, Melcy, I am unaware of anything that we can draw on that. Now, maybe, again, studying some of the rabbis, we could come up with something, but I didn't. And again, I'm striving hard to give good information, but I go home wondering how much of that did I miss, you know? Well, I hope y'all got something out of it. We're going about 5 minutes early. Thank you. Thank all of you for tuning in as well. And a good evening to you. Until we meet again. Happy trails to me. Keep smiling until then.